The morning light fell soft through the kitchen window of the small apartment on Cedar Street, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Michael Barnes stood at the counter, spreading peanut butter across two slices of bread with the careful precision of a man who had learned to make every jar last. His hands were rough, calloused from years of work at the furniture restoration shop downtown, but they moved gently now, the way they always did when he was doing something for his daughter. Sophie sat at the kitchen table behind him, her feet swinging beneath the chair because they couldn't quite reach the floor. She was 7 years old, small for her age, with her mother's dark hair and her father's quiet, watchful eyes. A photograph hung on the refrigerator beside her, held in place by a magnet shaped like a butterfly. In it, a woman with Sophie's same dark hair smiled at the camera, her arms wrapped around a younger version of the girl. The photograph was 3 years old now. The woman had been gone for 3 of Sophie's 7 years, taken by an illness that had moved too fast for anyone to stop. Michael didn't look at the photograph this morning. He rarely did anymore, though he knew exactly where it hung, could feel its presence the way you feel sunlight on your skin even with your eyes closed. Instead, he focused on the sandwich, cutting it diagonally the way Sophie liked, then wrapping it in wax paper. "Apple or orange today?" he asked, turning to face his daughter. Sophie considered this with the gravity of someone making a much larger decision. "Apple," she said finally. "The oranges are too hard to peel at school." Michael nodded, retrieving a small red apple from the bowl on the counter. He polished it against his shirt before placing it in the brown paper bag alongside the sandwich. A handful of crackers went in next, and then a small note he'd written the night before, the way he did every morning. Today's said simply, "You are brave and kind. Love, Dad." Sophie didn't know about the notes, or rather she pretended not to know, the same way Michael pretended not to notice when she saved them in the small wooden box he'd made for her last birthday. Some things were better left unspoken between them, understood in the silence that had become their shared language since Rachel's death. "Dad?" Sophie's voice pulled him back to the kitchen. "Can I wear Mom's bracelet today?" Michael's hand stilled on the paper bag. The bracelet was a simple thing, a thin silver chain with a small heart charm that Rachel had worn every day of their marriage. Sophie had found it in the jewelry box 3 months after the funeral and had asked to keep it. "Of course," he said. "It's on my dresser." Sophie slipped from her chair and padded down the hallway toward his bedroom. Michael watched her go, then turned back to the window, looking out at the narrow street below. The apartment wasn't much, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a bathroom with a shower that sometimes ran cold, but it was theirs, paid for by honest work and careful budgeting. The furniture shop where Michael worked was called Second Chances. He'd been a carpenter before, a good one, with a small business of his own. But Rachel's medical bills had consumed everything. When the dust settled after her death, Michael had found himself starting over at 42 years old, with nothing but his skills and his daughter and a grief so heavy it sometimes felt like drowning. Sophie returned wearing the bracelet, the silver chain loose on her thin wrist. She held up her arm for Michael to see, and he smiled, adjusting the clasp so it sat more securely. "Beautiful," he said. "Mom said silver goes with everything," Sophie replied matter-of-factly. Michael nodded, not trusting his voice for a moment. Then he handed her the lunch bag and reached for his keys. "Come on, sweetheart. We don't want to be late." At the school gates, Michael knelt down to Sophie's level, straightening the collar of her jacket. "Remember, I'll be here at 3:30. If I'm a few minutes late, wait by the big tree, okay?" "I know, Dad." Sophie's voice carried the patient exasperation of a child who had heard the same instructions 100 times. Sophie surprised him then by throwing her arms around his neck in a fierce hug. "I love you, Dad." He closed his eyes and held her. "I love you too, sweetheart, more than anything." Then she was gone, running toward the school building, the brown paper lunch bag clutched in one hand. Michael watched until she disappeared through the doors, then turned and walked toward the furniture shop. The shop was quiet when he arrived. Michael let himself in through the back entrance and stood for a moment surveying the projects waiting for him. A Victorian dresser with water damage, a set of dining chairs that needed regluing, a child's rocking horse, antique and beautiful, that someone had brought in hoping it could be saved. Michael ran his hand along the rocking horse's mane, feeling the smooth wood beneath his palm. That was what he loved about restoration, the possibility hidden in broken things. The knowledge that with patience and skill and care, something that seemed beyond repair could be made whole again. Around 11:30, his phone buzzed with a text from the school. His heart lurched the way it always did when he saw that number, but the message was routine, just a reminder about parent-teacher conferences. Michael released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding and returned to his work. He was sketching a restoration plan when his phone rang, the school's number again. This time, his hand trembled slightly as he answered. "Mr. Barnes, this is Patricia Reeves, the assistant principal at Jefferson. Is Sophie okay?" The words came out sharper than he intended. "Sophie is fine," Mrs. Reeves assured him quickly, "but we'd like you to come to the school if possible. There's been an incident, nothing serious, but we think it would be best if you were here." Michael was already reaching for his jacket. "I'm on my way." The walk to the school that morning had taken 12 minutes. Now, moving quickly, Michael made it in 8. His mind raced through possibilities, each more alarming than the last. Mrs. Reeves's office was small but warmly decorated. Sophie sat in one of the chairs, her small body rigid with an emotion Michael couldn't quite identify. Across from her sat a woman Michael didn't recognize, and beside that woman a boy who looked to be about Sophie's age, maybe a little younger. The boy was thin, painfully so, with hollow cheeks and eyes that seemed too large for his face. His clothes were clean but worn, the kind of wear that comes from being washed too many times. He sat with his hands folded in his lap, not looking at anyone, his shoulders curved inward as if he were trying to take up as little space as possible. "Mr. Barnes?" Mrs. Reeves rose to greet him. "Thank you for coming so quickly. Please have a seat." Michael sat beside Sophie, automatically reaching for her hand. She gripped his fingers tightly but didn't look at him, her gaze fixed on the boy across the room. "I want to start by saying that Sophie hasn't done anything wrong," Mrs. Reeves began. "Quite the opposite, actually. During lunch today, one of our staff members observed Sophie giving her entire lunch to this young man. When asked about it, Sophie explained that she noticed he didn't have any food and wanted to help." Michael looked at his daughter, his heart swelling with something that felt like pride and pain combined. "Sophie?" "He was hungry, Dad." Sophie's voice was small but steady. "Really hungry. The kind of hungry where your stomach hurts and you can't think about anything else." Michael remembered that kind of hunger. Not from his own childhood, but from the months after Rachel's death, when grief had consumed him so completely that he'd forgotten to eat for days at a time. He looked at the boy again, seeing now what Sophie must have seen. The way the child's eyes kept darting toward the door as if expecting to be asked to leave. The absolute stillness of someone who had learned that being noticed often meant being hurt. "And you are?" Michael asked the woman sitting beside the boy. "Diana Chen. I'm Ethan's caseworker. His mother is in the hospital. There's no father in the picture. He's been staying at a temporary placement while we try to locate family." "The placement," Mrs. Reeves interjected carefully, "has experienced some difficulties providing adequate meals." Michael understood what wasn't being said. The system was overwhelmed. A quiet child who didn't cause problems could slip through the cracks while louder emergencies demanded attention. "Ethan," Michael said gently, addressing the boy directly, "how old are you?" The boy's eyes flickered up to meet his, then quickly away. "6, he whispered. 6 years old, a year younger than Sophie, small and scared and hungry, with no one to pack him a lunch with a note that said he was brave and kind. Michael felt something shift in his chest, some wall he'd built without realizing it beginning to crack. "Mrs. Reeves," he said slowly, "what happens to Ethan now?" "We're working on finding a more suitable placement. In the meantime, we've arranged for him to receive school meals, though the current situation is temporary." Michael nodded, recognizing the helplessness beneath her professional tone. Dad? Sophie tugged at his hand. Can we help? Michael looked down at his daughter, at the hope and determination in her eyes, and he thought about Rachel, about the way she had always stopped for people on the street, giving what she had even when they had little to give. What did you have in mind? He asked. Ethan could come to our house for dinner, just tonight, so he could have a real meal. Michael's first instinct was to hesitate. Their apartment was small, their budget tight. But then he looked at Ethan again, at the hunger that went deeper than just food, and he knew what Rachel would have done. Is that something that could be arranged? Michael asked Diana Chen. The caseworker blinked, clearly surprised. I would need to make some calls. There are protocols. But if everything checks out, would 6 o'clock work? Michael nodded. 6 o'clock is fine. Sophie squeezed his hand so tightly it almost hurt, her face shining with a joy that Michael hadn't seen in months. The afternoon passed in a blur of preparation. Michael left work early, stopping at the grocery store on the way home. He bought a whole chicken, which he would roast the way his grandmother had taught him, with potatoes and carrots and herbs. He bought bread for making fresh rolls, and butter and milk. And because Sophie had asked specifically, he bought the ingredients for chocolate chip cookies, even though they hadn't made cookies together since before Rachel died. At home, he and Sophie worked side by side in the small kitchen. Sophie measured flour while Michael seasoned the chicken. She stirred the cookie dough while he chopped vegetables. They didn't talk much, but the silence was comfortable, filled with the sounds of cooking and the promise of something good. At 5:45, the doorbell rang. Diana Chen stood in the hallway, Ethan beside her. The boy was wearing different clothes now, a clean shirt that was slightly too large and pants that were slightly too short. He carried a small backpack that seemed to contain everything he owned. Thank you for doing this, Diana said. Ethan could use something good right now. We're happy to have him, Michael said. Diana bent down to Ethan's level. I'll be back to pick you up at 8, okay? Mr. Barnes and Sophie are going to take good care of you. After Diana left, the three of them stood in the entryway, the silence stretching between them. Then Sophie stepped forward and held out her hand. Hi, Ethan, she said. I'm Sophie. Do you want to see my room? Ethan looked at her hand, then at Michael. Whatever he saw there must have been reassuring because he slowly reached out and took Sophie's hand. Okay, he whispered. Sophie led him down the hallway, chattering about her collection of rocks and the drawings she'd been making. Her voice faded as they disappeared into her room. Michael stood alone in the kitchen, listening. He could hear Sophie explaining something, her tone bright and animated. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, he heard Ethan laugh. A small sound, rusty with disuse, but unmistakably a laugh. Michael leaned against the counter and closed his eyes, feeling something loosen in his chest. The chicken was ready by 6:15. Michael called the children to the table, watching as Ethan's eyes went wide at the sight of the food. The boy sat carefully in his chair, hands in his lap, as if afraid that reaching for anything would break some rule he didn't know existed. Would you like some chicken, Ethan? Michael asked, keeping his voice casual. Ethan nodded, still not speaking. Michael served him a generous portion, then added potatoes and carrots and one of the warm rolls Sophie had helped make. In this house, Michael said, we don't wait for everyone to be served. If you're hungry, you eat, okay? Ethan looked at the plate in front of him, then at Michael. Really? Really? The boy picked up his fork with trembling hands and took a bite of chicken. His eyes closed, and for a moment his whole body seemed to relax. He chewed slowly, savoring, and when he swallowed, he looked at Michael with an expression that made the older man's heart clench. It's good, Ethan whispered. It's really good. There's plenty more, Michael said. Eat as much as you want. After dinner, they ate cookies in the living room while Sophie showed Ethan her favorite book. The boy had relaxed enough to ask questions now, his voice still quiet but no longer a whisper. Michael sat in the armchair and pretended to read the newspaper, though really he was watching the children memorizing this moment. At 7:45, there was a knock at the door. Michael rose to answer it, expecting Diana Chen. Instead, a woman he'd never seen before stood in the hallway. She was tall, with dark hair pulled back in a severe ponytail and the kind of tailored clothing that spoke of money and power. "Mr. Barnes?" Her voice was cool, professional. "My name is Victoria Harper. I'm Ethan's aunt. May I come in?" Michael didn't move. Diana Chen didn't mention an aunt. "I've been overseas. I just got the news about my sister this afternoon. I came as soon as I could." From behind Michael, Ethan's voice rang out, small and uncertain. "Aunt Victoria?" The woman's composure cracked. Her eyes went past Michael to the boy standing in the living room doorway, and for a moment her face showed nothing but raw, desperate relief. "Ethan." Her voice broke on the single word. "Oh, sweetheart." Michael stepped aside, and Victoria Harper entered his apartment, dropping to her knees in front of her nephew. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, then launched himself into her arms with a sob. "I'm here," Victoria murmured, holding him tightly. "I'm here now. I'm so sorry." Eventually, Victoria pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. She stood and faced Michael. "I owe you an explanation," she said. "The caseworker told me where Ethan was, what you did for him tonight. You didn't have to do that." "He was hungry," Michael said simply. Victoria studied him. "I'm the CEO of Harper Technologies. My sister and I had a falling out years ago. I threw myself into work. She struggled. I should have been there for her, for both of them, but I wasn't." She looked down at Ethan. "Now I'm trying to fix what I should never have let break." Michael thought about his own regrets, the things he wished he'd done differently with Rachel. "You're here now," he said. Victoria nodded slowly. "I'm here now." The doorbell rang again. This time it was Diana Chen, arriving to pick up Ethan as planned. There followed several minutes of complicated conversation involving phone calls and verification of identity and discussions of custody procedures. Eventually, Diana left with Victoria and Ethan, promising to be in touch. The apartment felt suddenly too quiet. Michael stood in the center of the living room, looking at the chairs where the children had sat. "Dad?" Sophie's voice was tired but content. "That was a good thing we did, right?" Michael pulled her into a hug. "Yeah, sweetheart. That was a good thing." He carried her to bed and tucked her in with their special good night. "I love you to the moon," Michael said. "And back again," Sophie finished sleepily. Michael was drying the last pot when his phone rang, an unknown number. "Mr. Barnes, this is Victoria Harper. I'm calling because I wanted to really thank you." "You don't have to thank me. Sophie was the one who noticed Ethan needed help." "Then thank Sophie for me, and yourself for raising a child who notices. The world could use more people who notice." A pause. "Mr. Barnes, I'd like to do something for you. For your family. I have resources, if there's anything I can do." Michael felt himself stiffen. "We're fine. We don't need charity." "That's not what I'm offering." Victoria's tone softened. "What I'm trying to say is that you helped my nephew when you had no reason to. I want to find a way to say thank you that actually means something." Michael considered. "There's nothing I need, but if you really want to help someone, talk to Diana Chen. Find out how many other kids are falling through the cracks the way Ethan was. Put your resources there." Silence on the other end. Then slowly, "You're an unusual man, Mr. Barnes." "Michael," he corrected, "and I'm just a father who got lucky enough to have a daughter who pays attention." 3 weeks passed. Then on a Saturday morning there was a knock at the door. Victoria Harper stood in the hallway looking somehow different. Less polished, more human. She wore jeans and a simple sweater. Beside her stood Ethan, visibly healthier with color in his cheeks. "Hi, Mr. Michael," Ethan said. "We brought cookies." "Can we come in?" Victoria asked. "There's something I'd like to discuss with you." The children disappeared toward Sophie's room, leaving the adults alone. Michael poured coffee. "I took your advice," Victoria said. "I talked to Diana Chen, learned about the gaps in the foster system. I've started a foundation to fund meals and provide support for overwhelmed caseworkers. Michael nodded. That's good. That'll help a lot of people. But that's not why I'm here. She hesitated. I'm here because of Ethan. I've been granted custody. But Michael, I don't know how to do this. I've run a company, but raising a child, being what he needs me to be, I don't know how. Her voice cracked. Every time I feel lost, I think about that night at your apartment, the way Ethan relaxed, the way he laughed. He felt safe here. Michael thought about the question carefully. What exactly are you asking me? I'm asking if you'd be willing to teach me. Maybe Ethan could spend time with Sophie sometimes, and I could watch how you do it, how you make a home feel like a home. I'm not an expert, Michael said. I'm just figuring it out as I go. You're doing something right. Sophie is kind. She notices people. That doesn't happen by accident. Michael looked toward the hallway where he could hear the children laughing. He thought about Rachel, about the loneliness of the past 3 years. Saturday mornings, he said finally. Sophie and I usually make breakfast together, then do something, go to the park or the library. Ethan's welcome to join us. You too, if you want. Victoria's eyes were bright. Really? Really? We're not anything special, but we know how to make a home feel like a home. Victoria shook his hand. Thank you, Michael. I won't forget this. The months that followed were marked by small transformations. Saturday mornings became a fixed point in the week's rotation, with Ethan and Victoria arriving just as the smell of pancakes filled the air. At first, Victoria sat stiffly in the kitchen, watching Michael cook with the intensity of someone studying for an exam. But gradually she relaxed into the rhythm of their routine. The children bonded in the way that children do, quickly and completely. Sophie became more outgoing, eager to share her knowledge and her father's attention with her new friend. Ethan slowly emerged from the shell of fear and hunger that had enclosed him. He laughed more, he spoke more. He began to trust that the good things in his life weren't about to be snatched away. Victoria changed too. The CEO armor she wore began to crack, revealing the woman underneath, uncertain sometimes, but fierce in her love for Ethan. She asked Michael questions constantly about bedtimes and boundaries and how to handle tantrums. You're doing fine, he told her one morning. The fact that you're worrying means you care. That's most of the battle. On a bright Saturday in April, Victoria arrived without Ethan. Her face was strange, caught between excitement and nervousness. I want to make you a job offer, she said. Harper Technologies is opening a community center, a space where kids can come after school, get help with homework, learn skills. I've been looking for someone to run it. I want that someone to be you. Michael set down his coffee cup. I'm a furniture restorer. I don't have experience running community centers. You have exactly the experience that matters. You know how to create a space where people feel safe. You know how to listen, how to teach, how to care about people without making them feel like charity cases. Michael thought about the shop, about the satisfaction of taking broken things and making them whole. But he also thought about Ethan, about all the other kids out there who weren't lucky enough to have someone notice them. I'd need time to think about it, he said. Take all the time you need. That evening, he talked to Sophie about the opportunity. Would we still live here? She asked. Yes. Would Ethan still come over on Saturdays? Michael smiled. Probably more often than that. Sophie considered this. I think you should do it, Dad. Mom would want you to help people. The next morning, Michael called Victoria and told her yes. The community center opened on a warm day in early June. Michael stood off to the side during the ribbon cutting, watching as Victoria delivered a speech about community and second chances. Her eyes found his across the crowd, and her smile carried a private message of gratitude. The center was everything Victoria had promised, bright and welcoming, with study rooms and a library, a kitchen where kids could learn to cook, a workshop where Michael planned to teach carpentry. There were spaces designed with the understanding that different kids needed different things at different times. After the crowds had gone, Michael walked through the building, running his hand along walls and door frames. This was his space now, his chance to pass on what he knew to help other kids the way Sophie had helped Ethan. Victoria found him in the workshop. Having second thoughts? Just taking it in. You know what I've learned these past few months? That the most powerful thing in the world isn't money or influence, it's kindness. Simple, stubborn kindness. Michael thought about Sophie, about the brown paper bag she'd handed over to Ethan that day. Such a small gesture, such enormous consequences. Sophie's the one who deserves the credit, he said. Sophie learned it from you. A year later, on a Saturday morning that felt like any other, Sophie made pancakes while Ethan set the table and Victoria poured coffee. Michael stood at the stove, flipping bacon, listening to the children argue about something trivial, watching Victoria laugh at their antics. The apartment was the same. The photograph of Rachel still hung on the refrigerator. Nothing had been forgotten, nothing had been replaced, but something had been added. Love, multiplied instead of divided. Family found in unexpected places. "Pancakes are ready," Sophie announced, carrying a plate to the table. They sat together, the four of them, passing plates and pouring syrup in comfortable chaos. Outside, the sun rose higher, painting the windows gold. Michael looked around the table at the faces of the people he loved, the family he'd never expected to have. He thought about that afternoon in the school office, about a hungry boy and a lunch in a brown paper bag, about Sophie's simple question, "Can we help?" They'd helped, and been helped in return, and built something beautiful from the wreckage of their separate griefs. "Dad?" Sophie's voice pulled him back. "You're doing that thing again." "What thing?" "The staring thing, when you look at us like you're memorizing our faces." Michael smiled. "Caught me." "It's okay," Sophie said, reaching over to pat his hand. "Mom used to do it too." And there it was. Rachel, present in their midst, not as a ghost, but as a legacy. The love she'd taught them, the kindness she'd modeled, grown into something larger than any of them alone. Michael squeezed Sophie's hand, met Victoria's eyes across the table, watched Ethan pour entirely too much syrup on his pancakes. "Okay," he said. "Who wants seconds?" The morning unfolded around them, ordinary and extraordinary, perfect in its imperfection. And Michael Barnes, who had once stood alone with nothing but his skills and his daughter and a grief so heavy it felt like drowning, found himself full at last. Not because the grief had ended, but because there was room now for grief and joy together,